The Joy FM for several years, many years, since I moved back home to Tampa. I would listen to the Joy FM on my commute into work, going to work and then leaving the drive home. But more specifically, there's been definitely certain times in life where the Joy FM has been a lifeline. And in 2022, probably the biggest song and the biggest impact on my life was Build a Boat by Colton Dixon. To rewind a little bit, I guess, my story, I've been a broadcaster for almost 20 years. When I got into the business, I wanted to be the next Katie Couric. Thought I was going to live in New York City. And over the years, God kind of changed my heart. I grew up a Christian, always sought his will for my life, or at least tried to. But again, we have our personal goals of what we think, life is going to take us. At any rate, we kind of decided, my husband and I realized Tampa is where we wanted to raise a family and really put our roots down. So at the time, I was in Fort Myers, so I was a TV host there, working for a station, loved my job as a morning lifestyle host, so promoting all sorts of different businesses and restaurants and entertainment actors and musicians and everything. But at that time, we knew it was kind of time to come home to Tampa. So that was where I really began praying to have this dream job. That's kind of where we wanted to land. That was the new New York City in our mind. But nothing was really happening. I kept going on interview after interview, but God was not opening any doors. I kept praying. I would get these interviews and then it wouldn't happen. And I thought, God, why are you dangling this carrot in front of me? But we sold our house. I just really felt like God was calling us to move. He was not removing that desire to move back home to Tampa. So during that period of time, it almost felt a little bit, and I hate to say it because I'm nowhere near Noah, but it felt like I was building Noah's Ark because we were making the moves as if we were going home because I felt like that's where God wanted us, but nothing was happening. Nothing made sense. Well, God eventually, and I say God because it's really, the station in Tampa ended up launching a show, our sister station, at the same time that my contract was ending in Fort Myers. And in TV, that just doesn't happen. So God was able to align things perfectly for me to move back home to Tampa. And I had this dream job. I was able to help launch the show in Tampa. So that was my first kind of moment where I got that taste of what Noah must have been feeling like, doing something that doesn't make any sense and waiting on God to provide. And he did. So now fast forward to Tampa, I'm living the dream. We have 3 babies now. Thanking God every day for this job. Loved the people that I worked with. And everything was good. I thought I was going to retire there. And during COVID, like so many times, I think it really maybe forced us to look at where our priorities are, what we're promoting, what we're putting our trust in. It made me kind of refocus a little bit, as I think it did for a lot of people. And that was when I started to feel the calling of, wait a minute, maybe God has something else here. He provided this job, but I have a feeling this may not be where he wants me to end up. There was nothing else. I didn't know what that meant. So I just really started studying the Bible and praying and asking that he would reveal what those next steps would be. Didn't really have any next steps other than it was time to walk away. And it was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever done because I knew that it was a gift from God. But when you know that you're in God's will and he's called you to do things, there's a certain amount of peace that comes with it as well. And I struggled with that because when I did come to the decision to step away from from that job and career, not knowing what was going to be next, you still want it to be easy. Like, okay, God, like where, if this is what you're calling me to do, it feels like it should be easier. And it wasn't, it was hard. So it took a little while, I think, to eventually just let everything calm down. But I knew I was in the right spot and I knew that, I was still doing what I was being obedient. I didn't know what for. So I did. So I left, and that song, Build a Boat, came on. And it just, again, immediately took me back to reminding myself of when God had answered this prayer for this job in the beginning, and that we can put our trust in a God that we don't have to know where our next step is. We don't. And time again in my life, God has showed up, and he showed up big. And I don't know why he shows up for some and it feels like he doesn't for others sometimes. But I do know in my life, when you trust in him and say, God, I surrender it all. I surrender my hopes and my dreams to what you would have. That's all I want. And now when you hear that song, Build a Boat, I think that's what's so awesome about the Joy FM and music being a ministry, is it's so important to remember what God has done in our life. And those songs, it's like a soundtrack to our life, where when we hear those songs now and we see what God is doing, it reminds us, even a year, 2 years later, of look what God did. Look how God was faithful. So that's such a blessing.